Watching other music YouTube channels, you would be forgiven for thinking that great music works solely because it uses, I don't know, secondary dominance or, quartal harmony. But they're wrong. And even worse, they're massive nerds. Good music is always about more than just good music. And that's what this channel is about. Problem is, a lot of really very, very good musicians, far better than me, only know about music. They therefore have no broader perspective or understanding of culture or, frankly, other human beings. And this is what I think Pat Metheny forgot when he started criticizing Kenny G. To be honest, I'm not convinced Pat Metheny really gets this stuff in the first place. So, for anyone who doesn't know this Pat Metheny, Kenny G thing, it's kind of ancient history now. We'll start with Pat Metheny, right? He's an amazing guitarist. He's one of the best jazz guitarists out there. I love the guy's music. And broadly speaking, seems like a cool, chill guy, right? Kenny G also seems like an alright guy, but his music is this kind of just, it's crap. As far as I'm concerned, it's not good music at all, but it's easy jazz, some people might call it. It's very Muzak. It's just a dude blowing on his saxophone. But like this kind of easy listening, straightforward, schmaltzy crap. And I don't like, crap music is crap music. It's not a big deal, really. I listen to plenty of music that most people probably think is crap, so it's not really a big deal. The point here isn't that Pat Metheny criticized Kenny G's music, which is what he did. We'll get into that in a second. The problem is more his attitude towards someone making crap music, which to me doesn't seem a big deal. Anyway, so originally Pat was interviewed on Polish television. I can't even remember if he was specifically asked about Kenny G, but he just kind of went on this rant.
Some of the worst music on earth, like for instance Kenny G.
He went on this rant about Kenny G, and the hatred was obvious. It was vociferous. He was dripping with contempt for Kenny G.
Dumbest music there ever could possibly be in the history of human beings.
And it wasn't just that he thinks his music is crap, which again, I think Kenny G's music is a bit crap. That's fine. It's not really a big deal. It's that he clearly thinks that Kenny G is immoral, almost subhuman because of the way he makes music and how disrespectful Kenny G was towards serious musicianship and specifically to Louis Armstrong. Because Kenny G recorded himself playing over a recording of What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. In fact, here's a clip of Kenny G doing that right now. What a wonderful world. It's not great. It's really obnoxious, right? But it's also just not a big deal whatsoever. So let's just read a little bit about what Pat Metheny said beyond this in another interview with someone. So he was asked, Pat, could you tell us your opinion on Kenny G? It appears you were quoted as being less than enthusiastic about him and his music. I would say that most of the serious musicians in the world would not find your opinion surprising or unlikely. But generally you're supportive of other musicians, blah, blah, blah. That's the question, right? So Pat says, it starts off fine. Kenny G is not a musician I really had much of an opinion about at all until recently. Kind of thing. None of this is like a big deal. In fact, he can be more critical, and I think it's perfectly fine. He says that he's mostly limited to kind of blues-based and pentatonic kind of licked-derived patterns, and he only seemed to exhibit a rudimentary understanding of how to function as a professional soloist in an ensemble. This sounds to me like professional, critical comments, which is perfectly fine. Let's find out where it gets a little bit spicier, because it does kind of continue on here. He talks about how he had previously said in this interview that Kenny G plays the dumbest music on the planet. Something that Pat Metheny thinks all 8 to 11-year-old kids on the planet already intrinsically know, as anyone who's ever spent any time around kids that age could confirm. What? You think every 8 to 11-year-old on the planet thinks that about Kenny G? None of them care. None of them care, Pat. Now, there are other things he says about how the recording over Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World is, he says, callous disregard for the larger issues is a crass gesture. It's exacerbated by the fact that the only reason he could possibly have for doing something this inherently wrong in both musical and human terms was for the record sales and the money it would bring. So there's more, right? Pat Metheny hates Kenny G mainly for, not just for being like a bit cheesy and goofy, right? Not a very good musician, whatever, but for recording over Louis Armstrong's recording of What a Wonderful World. Kenny G's version of it, his playing over it, is naff and annoying and it's obnoxious, right? I agree with him that far. But the problem is, it doesn't mean anything. It does not matter. There's no sense of perspective from Pat Metheny of what really matters. You heard some of the statements there. He seems to think it is an actively immoral thing to do. And the point of this video, right, really is that Pat Metheny has no perspective. Maybe he's matured and got past this, but I don't think he has, because he's never gone back and commented on it. Kenny G himself has said, oh, I think this is a bit of an overreaction. I'm surprised he hates me so much. But Pat Metheny's just kind of moved on and left these remarks as his kind of final word on it, which is bizarre. Like, grow up and maybe look back and think, I was being a bit silly there. But Pat Metheny, in my opinion, has no real perspective on what actually matters, right? And I've said this to people before, and I've had a few people say, like, well, Pat Metheny's actually a world-class jazz musician. And who the hell are you to say that he has no real sensible perspective on this matter? The point of this video that I kind of want to bring home to people is that no one has less of an accurate perspective on the importance of something than a specialist in that topic, right? A jazz guitarist, Pat Metheny, I mean, I've read loads about this guy, listened to his music loads, he's amazing, right? He talks very frankly about how he spent his teenage years playing like 12, 14, 15 hours a day and doing nothing else. Like, that was his obsession from the age of like 12 onwards until he was 19, and then his life has been about music since. That is not how one develops a sensible perspective on the world and what is valuable out there. That's how you get good at guitar, and that's great. That's brilliant. Glad he did it. It's amazing. Other guitarists and musicians that I like have done similar things. It's amazing. But it's not how you develop a good perspective on what is actually valuable out there in the real world, because it becomes your overriding obsession. And it's clear from some of the comments he makes in some of these interviews that Pat Metheny thinks that what is valuable to him should be taken as obviously valuable to everyone else, not just in a musical sense, but in a kind of moral sense. He criticizes Larry Coryell for presuming to overdub himself on top of a Wes Montgomery track. And this is the real key phrase here, right? I lost a lot of the respect that I ever had for him, and have to seriously question the fact that I did have respect for someone who could turn out to have such an unbelievably bad taste and be that disrespectful to one of my personal heroes. Thing is, Pat, that's one of your personal heroes. No one owes you anything for your personal hero. You do not have a sensible, healthy perspective on what actually matters because you are a hyper super specialist in the world of jazz and jazz guitar. And that is amazing. That comes with loads of benefits and, you know, an ability to do things that the vast majority of human beings are never going to be able to do. But it also means your perspective is completely skewed. You're so close up that this world of jazz guitar just looks huge and like it's everything, right? But it's not. Kenny G is just a naff musician who played some naff saxophone on a great tune. It was a great tune. You know, the Louis Armstrong tune is great. And it's naff. But he didn't ruin it. There's no vandalism. There's no destruction of his historical object, because he just took it and it's just one digital copy. You know what I mean? That's it. He's not ruined the original recording. That's still out there. What does he feel about people who sample or change other versions of other songs? Is he equally annoyed that someone else sampled, I don't know, a drum beat from the Beatles or the Amen break, you know, and use that all over the place? Or that someone else might cover a song really bad and make it sound naff? Or I might sit at home and like jam over a recording of a song. Doesn't matter if it's done to make money or not, or if it's just me being shit at playing bass. I could slap over Imagine by John Lennon. Is he going to get really annoyed by that? I don't know. It would sound stupid. It would be vandalism in a similar kind of way. But it's just not a big deal, right? Like, and I think today, this is 20 odd years ago that Pat Metheny said all this. I think today most people have a much more sensible perspective on it, but at the time, I think people were a bit split on what they thought of Pat Metheny's comments. Some people, serious people in the jazz world, were like, okay, Pat, chill out. But I've talked to loads of people who are like, well, he was right because Kenny G's rubbish. But that's beyond the point. It doesn't matter whether Kenny G's good or bad. It just matters about like, what is a sensible perspective on this. Nothing was ruined. Nothing bad came of it. Am I meant to believe that Louis Armstrong would care if he were alive today? I'm not sure. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But we don't have to care whether he would care anyway. Anyway, to bring it all back around, the whole point really is just this matter of perspective. And actually, what it all ended up being about was Pat Metheny's, I don't want to say ego, yeah, I guess his ego a little bit, but lack of perspective and understanding that what is important to him is not important to everyone else. It's the same with this kind of Larry Coryell playing over Wes Montgomery. He's talking about it in terms, it makes it clear that it's about what he thinks is worthy of respect and what he doesn't like about other people doing to what he thinks is worthy of respect. That's not really a sensible position. And honestly, at times in the interview, Pat Metheny sounds much more like the comic book guy from The Simpsons than he does a respectable musician.
Dumbest music there ever could possibly be in the history of human beings.
The worst movie ever! And sinned!
So, Pat, I think you're great, but stop being such a dweeb, okay? Stop it.